details, Cher and Micah. Tonight we are learning new details about baby Emmanuel. Prosecutors say he died after suffering long-term abuse.
Yes, we have a pretty strong indication of where the remains of baby Emmanuel are. That investigation is ongoing at this time.
New disturbing details are emerging tonight about what may have happened to 7-month-old baby Emmanuel, and why prosecutors now insist his father, Jake Haro, should have been locked away long before tragedy struck. What was once framed as mysterious kidnapping has unraveled into a darkened narrative of abuse, lies, and systemic failure. Despite exhaustive searches, the remains of baby Emmanuel have never been recovered. Still, investigators say the absence of a body does not erase the evidence they've uncovered. According to prosecutors, the Haro home tells its own story, a pattern of deception layered over a violent past. They argue that behind Jake's claims of love and innocence lies a history of cruelty that had already been documented by authorities years earlier. Court records reveal that Jake Haro had previously been convicted of child cruelty, an offense that should have raised alarms about the danger he posed.
Absolutely nothing worse than harming a baby. Broken bones, injuries, life-altering trauma. And had that case been successfully handled how it should have been, Emmanuel would still be with us today.
Prosecutors now say this was a missed opportunity, a point in time where a stronger sentence could have kept him behind bars and prevented another child from being placed in harm's way. Instead, Jake remained free, and months later, Emmanuel vanished under circumstances that prosecutors argue bear all the marks of abuse and cover-up. As the case deepens, the public's outrage grows louder. How could a man with a record of violence against children have been allowed to walk free with only probation and light restrictions? How many warnings were ignored before the worst happened? Chris Wolf is live with the heartbreaking details as the nation turns its eyes on Riverside County, demanding answers. And tonight, one painful question cuts through the noise, echoing in every courtroom and household. How was this preventable tragedy ever allowed to happen? Prosecutors allege that baby Emmanuel endured months of silent suffering, long-term abuse that they say ultimately led to his death. Behind closed doors, investigators claim the 7-month-old was not the victim of a stranger's kidnapping, but of repeated cruelty at the hands of those who should have protected him the most. The picture they paint is one of a fragile life stolen before it had even begun, a tragedy that was hidden under layers of lies. Jake and Rebecca Haro now stand accused of the most unthinkable crime, murdering their infant son. Alongside the murder charge, they face an additional count for filing a false police report after insisting that Emmanuel had been abducted from a Big 5 parking lot. Prosecutors argue this fabricated story was a desperate attempt to deflect blame and mislead investigators, a calculated cover-up that wasted precious time during the crucial first hours of the investigation. Yet the most haunting mystery remains unsolved. Where are Emmanuel's remains? Despite tireless searches across Riverside County, from residential neighborhoods to remote desert areas, his body has never been found. Officials have stated they possess strong indications of where Emmanuel may be located, but they stopped short of releasing specifics. The ongoing search involves specialized teams, cadaver dogs, and forensic experts combing through miles of terrain, but each day without answers deepens the grief of a community already shattered. As investigators close in on what they believe to be the truth, one chilling reality lingers. Until Emmanuel is found, the harrowing story of a kidnapping cannot be fully erased, and justice of the smallest victim of all remains painfully incomplete. According to investigative reporter Brian Enton, a shocking revelation has surfaced. Jake Haro allegedly confessed to killing his own son, but not in a courtroom or interrogation room. Instead, his supposed admission came during a covert Perkins operation, a tactic where law enforcement secretly places suspects with undercover operatives posing as fellow inmates. In this controlled environment, where suspects often feel emboldened to speak freely, Jake allegedly revealed a horrifying detail, that he killed baby Emmanuel and disposed of his tiny body in a trash can. But this was not the only version of events Jake has offered. Prior to the alleged Jailhouse confession, Jake had told investigators an entirely different story, claiming Emmanuel's death was a result of a tragic accident. He said he had accidentally rolled over onto his son while sleeping, suffocating him, and later panicked, burying the body. Detectives, however, quickly cast doubt on this account. To them, it seemed like a desperate fabrication, another attempt by Jake to soften the truth and present himself as careless rather than violent. Meanwhile, Rebecca Haro continues to cling to her narrative, maintaining that Emmanuel was abducted by a stranger in a parking lot. Her story has never changed, at least not publicly, but authorities say her version of events simply does not align with the evidence. Surveillance footage, witness statements, and inconsistencies in her timeline have led investigators to conclude that Rebecca's kidnapping claim is false, a cover story meant to shield both herself and Jake from the inevitable weight of justice. Between Jake's shifting confessions and Rebecca's unwavering but discredited kidnapping tale, investigators are left piecing together fragments of truth from a web of lies. And at the center of it all is the most heartbreaking reality, a 7-month-old baby, silenced forever, whose final resting place is still unknown. In 2023, court documents reveal Jake Haro was convicted of child cruelty against his young daughter from a previous marriage, a case that prosecutors now point to as a glaring warning sign that went tragically unheeded. Despite the severity of the abuse, which doctors said left behind devastating injuries, Jake was spared a prison sentence. Instead, a judge suspended his time behind bars and handed him probation along with just 180 days of work release. In practical terms, this meant Jake was allowed to continue living in the community, leaving jail during the day to perform assigned labor, before returning each evening. That decision now hangs heavily over this case. The child he abused, his daughter Carolina, survived, but she lives with the lifelong consequences of what prosecutors describe as relentless cruelty. Carolina, once a healthy little girl, is now bedridden with cerebral palsy, her body permanently damaged from injuries investigators linked to long-term abuse. Advocates and prosecutors alike argue that the leniency Jake received in 2023 set the stage for the tragedy that followed. Had he been properly sentenced, they insist he would have been behind bars, unable to harm another child, and baby Emmanuel would still be alive today. This is a chilling reality prosecutors want the nation to confront. A father with a documented violent past, a justice system that failed to act with the full weight of its power, and a tiny life stolen before it truly began. As Jake and Rebecca Haro now await their next court date on charges of murder and deception, one question overshadows the courtroom drama, one that pierces through every legal argument and every televised interview. Where's baby Emmanuel?